Hello, I'm Malcolm. Welcome to edition 2041 of the Enfield Talking newspaper. With me on the reading team for Thursday the 10th of March 2016 are Elizabeth, Katherin and Patricia. Our editor is Audrey and Jason is on the controls. And the items we'll be reading are the copyright of our local newspapers, the Enfield Gazette and Advertiser and the Enfield Independent. This week's local stories include a grandmother praises the nurses who saved her life, a council's salary sparks anger amid huge cuts, property developers block access to green space, and cycle campaigners make a plea to the mayor. But before we go to the papers, we've got a reminder about Sonata. I hope you're not bored with that by now. But did you know that 7 out of 10 of listeners to the Enfield Talking newspaper are actually listening on digital now, and they say the quality is much better. So maybe it's time for you to switch, but somebody will be round to talk to you about that if you want. But let's hear about Sonata first, and then I'll remind you how you can get in touch to find out more about digital.
Thank you. Enfield Talking newspaper is now available on Sonata. Sonata is an internet radio service developed by the British Wireless for the Blind Fund, specifically for use by blind and partially sighted people. Sonata devices are available to buy from the British Wireless for the Blind Fund and require a broadband connection. You might qualify for a Sonata device on free loan. To qualify, you would need to be registered blind or partially sighted, be a UK resident, and get means-tested benefits like pension credit, attendance allowance, or a carer's allowance. For more information about this, telephone the British Wireless for the Blind Fund on 01622 754 757. That's 01622 754 757. If you would like to experience a Sonata in action, please get in touch with your listener's representative, Diane de Jersey, on 020 8805 6578.
And I don't think you necessarily have to have a Sonata to have the Enfield Talking newspaper on digital. You might have another device that's suitable. But if you'd like to find out, contact Diane or with any other problems or concerns you have about your talking newspaper, because she's your listener's representative. And her number again is 020 8805 6578. That's 020 8805 6578. And here's Elizabeth with the first news item.
A grandmother has praised the nurses who saved her life, describing them as like angels to me. Betty Shelford, 79, of Broadlands Avenue, Enfield, went to Cavell Hospital in Enfield for a knee operation on July the 27th. 3 days later, having just been given the all clear to go home, she had a seizure, the reasons for which she is still unsure, and was rushed to Barnet Hospital, where she spent the next 2 months, the first of which she spent completely bedbound. Miss Shelford, who has 2 children and one 21-year-old grandson, said her weight had fallen to 8 stone and she felt so ill she just wanted to die. She said, "I just wished I'd never had the operation. My children were put through hell and so much stress. I felt so ill I tried to starve myself at first. I just didn't want to live at all." But Miss Shelford says she was convinced to live by the nurses on Larch Ward. She said she couldn't praise the medical staff highly enough, particularly given the pressures they were under caring for many other patients at the same time. She said, "They said, 'You're not due to die yet, Betty. It's not your time.' They were like angels to me. Those nurses made me feel like I wanted to live again. They were so kind and gentle, and they talked to me all the time, and it felt like they were part of family." Miss Shelford, who also spent time recuperating in Enfield hospitals, Chase Farm and North Middlesex, says she is now gradually improving. She also said she had a new feeling of respect and gratitude towards the NHS, and that it annoys her that others don't appreciate it in the same way. She said, "Before the knee op, I used to go out every day. Now I need a Zimmer frame to get anywhere. One day I want to walk properly again. That's my big aim for the future." What annoys me is the government's attitude to nurses and junior doctors. It's just a pity they weren't lying there with me, able to understand what I was going through. They're pushing them so far we will only lose them. I was also at North Middlesex A&E for a different reason, when the announcement was made for people to go home if they didn't have a life-threatening illness. I'd been waiting for 7.5 hours myself. I thought it was a good decision. The nurses work very hard. What else are you supposed to do? Some people go to A&E for very silly reasons. Our nurses and doctors are great. They do what they can for a lot of people. Frankly, though, I don't want to see a hospital ever again. A spokesman for the Royal Free London NHS Trust, which runs Barnet Hospital, said, "We're delighted to hear that Betty Shelford was pleased with the care she received at Barnet Hospital. We will ensure that this feedback is passed to the staff who cared for Miss Shelford."
Enfield Council has been slammed after it was revealed their chief executive earns more than the Prime Minister. Financial figures released on the authority's website show Rob Leake's salary last year was £190,000, which is £48,000 higher than David Cameron's. It has also been confirmed 14 council workers have salaries worth £100,000 or above. The same documents also revealed the council spent more than £1,000 of taxpayers' money on cinema tickets and fast food through purchase cards used by staff to charge expenses. Enfield Southgate MP David Burrows accused the council of wastefulness, while they are also cutting millions of pounds from the Enfield Youth Service. He said, "The council must think again and put vulnerable people ahead of Big Macs, big salaries and wasteful self-promotion. It should cut its debit card and not youth services. The council can't blame it all on central government when it chooses to spend nearly £500,000 a year on PR and keep staff on high pay. They also need to be upfront with the public and say they're making choices, like funding an unpopular cycle lane scheme and cutting transport for special education needs for the vulnerable." Information on the council's website details spending through purchase cards, and among the 1,200 transactions between January and September 2015 are £629 worth of payments to Cineworld and £426 to McDonald's. Council leader Doug Taylor defended the pay packet given to Mr Leake, saying the authority needed high-performing senior officers. He added the purchase cards are important as well to help deliver services, including support for vulnerable residents. Councillor Taylor said, "This can include trips to various locations by council staff to support children in care and their families and carers, like eateries and cinemas." Even though the basic pay range for the Chief Executive of Enfield Council has not been increased since April 2007, he has declined significant elements of his pay over the last 3 years.
Residents campaigning to save a swathe of green land in the midst of a heavily residential area have hit out at property developers who have blocked their access to the land. After successfully seeing off an application from Fairview New Homes to build housing and a new school on the patch of land to the south of Enfield Road, between Cotswold Way and Lowther Drive, the Enfield Roadwatch Group has hit out at the decision by property developers to bar the campaigners from carrying out their own independent biodiversity studies. The developers are managing the green space on behalf of the London Diocesan Fund, which owns the land. Campaigners submitted an application to the developers to gain access to the land so they could commission their own ecological surveys to build an authoritative picture of the flora and fauna that currently flourish on the site. However, last week they were told their application for access had been denied. Ian D'Souza, the chairman of Enfield Roadwatch, said, "Our wish to carry out ecological, wildlife and biodiversity studies has been based on the unprecedented response from the community to save this particular piece of greenbelt land. We have had more than 5,000 signatures on our change.org petition so far. We felt that by carrying out our own totally independent studies, we would get a clear, unbiased report on the rich ecological value of this land. This would not only inform concerned residents and the community as a whole, but would help with data towards Enfield's Biodiversity Action Plan, due to be reviewed this year. Fairview Homes were approached for a comment, but none had been received by the time the Advertiser went to press.
The number of words over Cycle Enfield has been ramped up. Over a 300-strong group of campaigners wrote an open letter to the Mayor of London condemning attempts to put the brakes on the plans. The Enfield Cycling Campaign and the We Support Enfield Mini Holland campaign group wrote the letter last week and attacked Enfield Southgate MP David Burrows, as well as criticising the demands of the Save Our Green Lanes campaign. Regarding the survey Mr Burrows carried out last year, the campaigners stated in their letter Mr Burrows' claim that 75% of his constituents oppose the scheme is deliberately misleading. A survey of approximately 17,000 of his 65,000 constituents produced 1,973 responses saying no to the scheme. We make that 11.6% of those surveyed, or a mere 3% of all of his constituents, and definitely not the 75% he claimed. They also say that Mr Burrows has appeared to work closely with the Save Our Green Lanes campaigners who, they add, have been misleading members of the public over the content of the plans. They say that this group has published posters which state that the cycle lanes will remove most, if not all, parking from town centres in green lanes. However, they write, Cycle Enfield has stated in the consultation that most will remain. The letter adds that the Save Our Green Lanes campaign has said it is bound to cause the mass closure of local businesses, but the authors of the letter say that there is no evidence anywhere in the world of cycle lanes hurting businesses, and plenty to the contrary. Asking the Mayor to ignore Mr Burrows' plans to halt the delivery of monies to the scheme, the authors write, We aspire to a future for our borough where every child can safely walk or cycle to school. Active travel is a convenient option for everyone, and every residential street is safe for children to play on. We would like to live somewhere where fewer people need to own cars, the air is safe to breathe, and high streets are attractive, people-friendly, and therefore prosperous. Please confirm that no funds will be withheld and that you will continue to work with our council to progress the Mini Holland Cycle Enfield programme. Responding to the attack on his campaigning, Mr Burrows told the Advertiser, From the outset, I have been committed to ensuring that the voices of my constituents are heard in relation to Cycle Enfield. I am happy to be criticised for working hard to get the views of any of my constituents heard. I am not aligned to any campaigners group, but do agree with campaigners that the overwhelming opposition from local businesses and many constituents is being ignored by the council.
I believe this article follows on from the one that Malcolm has just read. Mayoral candidate Zac Goldsmith has cast doubts on plans for Cycle Enfield, saying the proposals are too unpopular to be rolled out in full. Speaking to the Advertiser on Tuesday after visiting small businesses in David Burrows' Enfield Southgate constituency on Saturday, Mr Goldsmith said that in one of the other outer London boroughs to receive Mini Holland funding, Kingston upon Thames, the plans were more popular with residents because of a better consultation process. We need to make cycling provision, admitted the Tory candidate in May's mayor election, London election. He said the numbers are already big and they're going to double again, and that's a good thing. We need to encourage that, so we need more cycling schemes, but you can't do that without consent from the people at large. He admitted that he had not spoken to the council or cycling campaigners in Enfield about their views on the proposals, but insisted that meeting Mr Burrows and his associates had not given him a one-sided view of the scheme. My understanding from businesses and residents is that there are a huge number of complaints that need to be addressed, said Mr Goldsmith. But with an issue as emotive as asking people to use their cars less, won't there always be objections to change, particularly in outer London boroughs like Enfield? That's not the experience with schemes in Richmond and Kingston, said the MP for Richmond Park. People are really on board with the scheme there. One of the big issues that will face the next mayor will be the rising tide of pollution currently choking London. So would Mr Goldsmith consider banning diesel vehicles or expanding the congestion zone in a bid to bring down the numbers of cars, vans and lorries that are pumping diesel fumes into the air? He said if I were elected by 2018, all new black cabs would be made to have zero emissions or be electric, and I would introduce a retrofitting scheme for cabs bought before 2018 so that they would be able to run on liquefied petroleum gas. But the congestion charge was never intended as a way of reducing pollution. It was designed for something different. There is a lot more we can do to cut pollution in London around reducing HGV journeys. Mr Goldsmith is openly Eurosceptic and in favour of voting to leave the European Union. At the moment, one of the ways in which air quality is monitored and controlled is through referencing European regulations around safe limits for pollution. But if we came out of Europe, who would set and monitor London air pollution? He said we could regulate air pollution ourselves. He said that Londoners do face a risk on May the 5th, a risk about whether London moves forwards or goes backwards.
And following on from the cycle concerns, there's a story in the Advertiser by one of their journalists, Ruth McKee, who is a cyclist, and she got the opportunity to spend some time in the cab of an HGV, looking at the way the HGV driver sees or doesn't see the cyclist. And Ruth writes, as a cyclist in London, there are no words to describe the fear that creeps up from the pit of the stomach when the distinct throttle of a tipper truck, skip lorry or delivery truck hurtles closer to your right shoulder. At junctions, I treat HGVs as if they are giant, deadly, purring beasts, primed to turn left across me, sucking my bike under wheels that are as tall as me. And now, after my first experience sitting in the eye of the beast in the cab of a lorry, I realise my terror is actually the only thing keeping me from being flattened. Sitting in the driver's seat of an HGV and looking in every mirror, I cannot see the policeman standing with his bike directly beside the left-hand door of the cab. I see him briefly when he starts cycling from the left rear wheel, but in a matter of milliseconds, by the time I've checked my other mirrors, he's disappeared. He stands at various points around the lorry. The only time I can see him clearly is when he stands at the very edge of the mocked-up advanced stop cycle box. If he was even standing towards the back of that box, I would have no idea he was there and would drive off over him. PC Gavin Stubbington is with me in the cab, making sure there's no way I accidentally run over one of his colleagues. The switching places exercise is designed to show cyclists how easily they can become caught in an HGV driver's blind spot. Last year, 9 cyclists died in London, he tells me. They all died at junctions where HGVs turned left across them. In London, it can be misleading for cyclists because as the road leads towards a junction, there is often a painted cycle lane or a picture of a cyclist on the far left of the road, on the inside blind spot of lorries, leading up to the advanced stop box for cyclists. PC Stubbington admits the painted lines on the road can be misleading. Never cycle on the left inside side of the HGV because even if they aren't indicating, they might turn left and they can't see you, he warns. For me, on my bike, I stay back behind the lorry, and if I need to get across the junction, walk my bike onto the pavement and cross the road at the pedestrian lights. He added that the crucial thing for cyclists in front of HGVs at junctions is to look up and wave at the driver to make sure they can see them. They're trained to wave back or acknowledge that they've seen you, so you can be confident that you're not in their blind spot, he explains.
Conditions for children in northern France refugee camps are uninhabitable and inhumane, according to an Enfield MP. David Burrows, MP for Enfield Southgate, visited a camp in Dunkirk and the so-called Calais jungle, which was demolished on February the 29th. He was the first Conservative MP to visit in 6 months and will be publishing a report on the future of immigrants in the UK soon, as a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee, scrutinising the Home Office's response to the crisis. He said the plight of the Iraqi and Afghan migrants at the camps was the worst he has seen. Mr Burrows said, "The conditions in Dunkirk are uninhabitable and inhumane. Yesterday I experienced the carnage that ensued after the inhumane treatment of the migrants and refugees by the riot police. The removal by force with water cannons and tear gas do not constitute the humanitarian and progressive evacuation promised by the Mayor of Calais. There is an alternative way which the Mayor of Dunkirk is pursuing, based on cooperation and respect, which provides alternative, humane shelter. With the Home Affairs Select Committee, I am demanding details from the government about plans for these children who are at great risk of being trafficked." Mr Burrows was joined by Southgate constituent Dr Ali Demirbag, who leads ITSEB, a network of Turkish health professionals. The MP was hosted by Médecins Sans Frontières and volunteers from the UK charity Help Refugees.
Hospital bosses have been called into a meeting after their emergency department was branded one of Britain's worst. NHS Improvement, which regulates national health care, have called in the leaders of the 30 trusts with the A&E departments which have been the lowest rated, including North Middlesex University Hospital. They said the Enfield Hospital was one of several requiring extra support to get up to the expected standards. Nathan Shreve-Smith, a spokesman for NHS Improvement, said, "We recognise that a number of trusts, including North Middlesex, require some extra support, and we will continue to work with them to develop detailed local system plans to help them see and treat patients more quickly." A person died in the A&E department at North Middlesex in December, despite being regularly observed and checked on by hospital staff. North Middlesex A&E also recently came under fire for telling patients who had been waiting for hours to go home unless they had a life-threatening illness or injury via the tannoy system. A spokesperson for North Middlesex said, "Our key priority currently is to recruit the extra emergency department consultants we need to bring our team up to full strength. However, we are also pleased to report that we've made some progress in recent weeks. Notably, our new GP-led See and Direct scheme is helping us to redirect about 1 in 12 A&E patients who would be better off seeing their own GP or a pharmacist. It's better for patients because they don't have to wait so long for treatment, and it's better for our hard-working staff who can concentrate on the sickest patients."
This is a letter, and it follows on from the last article. It's a letter from E. Lamb of Tinton Road, Wood Green. She writes, "The recent chaos at North Middlesex University Hospital has not gone away. My fiancé has been to A&E twice recently. First, he went for a suspected DVT. After several hours in casualty, he was sent home and told to come back next day. We did so for ambulatory care, and it was chaos, with too many people and not enough chairs. We were there from 9:30 right up to 6 p.m. Luckily, my fiancé got the scan, which showed he didn't have a DVT, and was sent home with more pills. But a week later, he returned to A&E by ambulance with problems regarding his gallbladder. Again, there were many people in casualty, although luckily we didn't have to wait too long. However, there were no cubicles available, so he was seen in the plaster room. As later, he was told they were sending him home again with more pills. I decided to go to the GP to hand in a form and said he was in agony. Fortunately, the GP managed to get him back to the North Mid, but we were told to go to the surgical assessment unit. My fiancé waited in a chair, being of partial sight. He sat there for several hours before he was finally admitted to a ward because I said that I didn't want him home until the problem had been sorted out. I've written to you many times about how Chase Farm's A&E unit should not have been closed. What should happen in A&E is that there should be more cubicles, an ultrasound machine and an echo machine for heart scans for a start. He was not the only patient who had to wait a long time. Perhaps a walk-in centre would do at North Middlesex like they used to have, or reopen Chase Farm's A&E unit, as it should have never closed.
Who braved Arctic waters to deliver vital wartime aid to Russia, has been honoured with a prestigious medal. Frederick Webb was sent to a training school in Earl's Court in West London to learn communication skills including Morse code before joining the crew of the destroyer HMS Skate on the hazardous convoys, enduring freezing temperatures amid the constant risk of attack by German U-boats during World War II. The vessel was built in 1917 and brought U-boats into harbour in Harwich during World War I. Mr. Webb, who is 92 and lives in Baikula Road, Enfield, was honoured with the Ushakov Medal by the Russian government in recognition of his bravery at a ceremony at the Mayor's Parlour in Enfield Civic Centre last week. Assistant Russian Naval Attaché Commander Igor Elkin said, "The Ushakov Medal is the most respected medal in the Russian Navy. The Russian convoy was a very big help for Russians." Mr. Webb served as a Royal Navy telephonist and helped entertain troops by playing records they requested to while away their downtime. He said, "It was very hazardous. We used to assemble at Loch Ewe and head up to the Arctic Circle, which took us 7 days. There were U-boats up there looking for us. However, he never came under attack." He said that when the ship was part of a convoy, it had to maintain transmission silence. "You never transmitted messages unless it was vital," he explained. "If you transmitted, you had the fear of being picked up by the enemy." More than 3,000 servicemen died on the Russian convoys between 1941 and 1945 as German submarines and aircraft tracked them down. In 1944, Mr. Webb transferred to duties sweeping the English Channel of mines in advance of the Normandy landings. He said, "I was there during D-Day. You had to be prepared for anything to happen." After the war, Mr. Webb joined the Metropolitan Police, initially at Hornsey, where he used his Morse code skills communicating via police cars. In 1958, he transferred to the Thames Division Support Unit at Waterloo Bridge. Some of the world's leading film stars visited for a trip on the Thames, and Mr. Webb met Grace Kelly, who was by then Princess Grace of Monaco, John Wayne and Telly Savalas. He retired in 1971 and worked in Enfield Council's Highways Department, where he ensured that road signs were correct.
And so we've come to the end of the first half of this week's recording. If you're listening on tape, please stop your machine now, take out the cassette, turn it over and start side 2. If you're listening on memory stick, click forward to the next track.